The receptionist laughed. Not the kind of polite laugh people use to hide discomfort. A real laugh. The kind that says you've already decided exactly who someone is. It echoed across the quiet hotel lobby. Behind a man standing at the front desk, rainwater dripped steadily onto the polished marble floor. Balanced against his shoulder was a little girl, 8 years old, still wearing the gold medal she'd won only a few hours earlier. She was fast asleep, her small arms wrapped loosely around her father's neck, exhausted from the 3-hour drive home. The man shifted her carefully so she wouldn't wake. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Could I please have a room? His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't desperate, just tired. 15 minutes later, security would escort him toward the front doors. 30 minutes later, the entire lobby would discover they had just thrown the owner out of his own hotel. And before sunrise, 3 employees would lose careers they'd spent years building. Not because they failed to recognize him, because they failed to recognize his humanity. This is the story of Marcus Carter, the founder of Sterling and Row Hotels. The man whose greatest achievement wasn't building luxury hotels. It was trying to build a place where nobody would ever be judged by the clothes they wore. Ironically, the one place that forgot that lesson was his own. Long before Marcus Carter became one of the most respected names in hospitality, he was just a 16-year-old boy folding towels inside a roadside motel. The building smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. The vending machine only worked if you kicked it twice. The ice machine was broken more often than it worked. Guests rarely looked at him. Some dropped towels into his hands without saying a word. Others spoke over him as if he were part of the furniture. Marcus noticed something long before he understood it. The people who received the warmest smiles weren't always the nicest, or the kindest, or even the wealthiest. They simply looked like they belonged. A tailored jacket, an expensive watch, confident footsteps, good luggage. Those things earned respect before anyone spoke. And Marcus hated it. One evening, after watching a tired construction worker get treated like an inconvenience while a wealthy businessman received complimentary champagne for waiting 5 extra minutes, Marcus stood alone in the laundry room holding a stack of freshly folded towels. That was the moment he made himself a promise. One day, he would build a hotel where nobody had to dress like success, to be treated with dignity. It took him 22 years to keep that promise. Community college during the day, night shifts behind motel front desks, business classes he could barely afford, loans that almost buried him, investors who laughed at his idea of building luxury hotels around one simple principle. Treat every guest like they matter, especially the ones nobody notices. His first hotel barely survived. His second made a profit. His fifth made headlines. By the time Marcus turned 40, Sterling and Row had become one of the fastest-growing luxury hotel brands in America. 41 properties, 5-star reviews, international awards, world leaders, athletes, actors, business executives. They all stayed there. But almost nobody knew one unusual habit Marcus refused to give up. He never announced himself before visiting one of his hotels. No private jet, no executive escort, no assistant walking ahead, no general manager nervously waiting at the entrance. He arrived exactly the way an ordinary guest would. A hoodie, jeans, sometimes a baseball cap, sometimes carrying nothing but a backpack. Board members hated it. His executives constantly begged him to stop. What if something happens? Marcus always smiled. If something happens to me, it's probably happening to my guests. And if he couldn't experience what they experienced, he had no business calling himself their host. Tonight, none of this was supposed to happen. Tonight wasn't a business inspection. It wasn't a surprise audit. It wasn't even work. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his daughter's life. For 2 months, Nora had practiced spelling words everywhere. Flashcards covered the refrigerator. Sticky notes filled bathroom mirrors. She even quizzed herself while brushing her teeth. Marcus canceled 2 board meetings just to watch her compete. He wouldn't have missed it for anything. When they announced first place, Nora looked around the auditorium until she found her father. She didn't run to the trophy. She ran to him, laughing, crying. throwing both arms around his waist. "I did it, Daddy." Marcus knelt and hugged her tightly. "I never doubted you." She proudly clipped her gold medal onto her jacket before insisting on wearing it all the way home. Less than 30 minutes into the drive, she was asleep. The trophy rested safely in the back seat. The medal still shimmered softly against her jacket. Marcus smiled every time he looked in the rearview mirror. Then, the sky changed. Rain exploded against the windshield, so suddenly the wipers struggled to keep up. Wind bent trees tore the highway. Traffic slowed to a crawl. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. A message from his housekeeper. "Power's out. Entire neighborhood. Utility company says it could be several hours." Marcus sighed. He looked back at Nora. Her shoes were soaked from running across the school parking lot after the competition. Her hair still carried tiny droplets of rain. She looked so peaceful. There was no way he was taking her home to a cold, dark house. Not after a day she'd worked so hard for. He glanced at the navigation screen. Just 12 minutes away, Sterling and Row downtown, his flagship property, the hotel he'd always described as the heart of the company. He smiled to himself. One warm room, a hot shower, breakfast together in the morning. Then they'd head home after the power returned. Simple, or at least, that's what he thought. The lobby doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Warm air rushed over Marcus and Nora, washing away the chill of the storm outside. Golden chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. A pianist in the lounge played softly in the background. Fresh lilies decorated the reception desk. Everything about the lobby whispered luxury. Marcus smiled. "This'll do." Nora stirred slightly against his shoulder. He gently rubbed her back. "We're almost done, baby." She settled again. "Fast asleep." Marcus walked toward the reception desk. Water dripped steadily from the sleeves of his hoodie, leaving tiny puddles behind him. The young receptionist looked up. Her name, tag read, Ashley. For the briefest second, her smile appeared. Then her eyes traveled over Marcus. The soaked hoodie, the faded jeans, the muddy sneakers, the sleeping child. The smile disappeared. Not dramatically, just quietly. "Good evening," Marcus said politely. "I'd like a room for tonight." Ashley hesitated. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm afraid not. Our neighborhood lost power. My daughter just won a spelling competition. I really just need somewhere warm for her to sleep." Ashley looked past Marcus, almost as though she expected someone else to walk through the revolving door behind him. Someone dressed differently. Someone who looked more like the guest she was used to checking in. She turned back to her computer. Her fingers began typing. Marcus glanced toward the screen. Several rooms appeared available. Ashley nodded slightly. "It looks like we still have." Marcus smiled. Nora opened one sleepy eye. "Are we staying here?" Marcus smiled back. "I think so." Ashley reached for a room assignment. Before she could press enter, a voice interrupted. "Ashley." She stopped immediately. The shift manager approached from the office. Tall, perfectly pressed suit, silver name badge. David Cole. Ashley leaned toward him, quiet enough that she thought Marcus couldn't hear. "Walk in." David looked once at Marcus, then at Nora, then back to Ashley's monitor. His expression hardened. He pressed one key on the keyboard. The available room disappeared. Ashley looked confused. "But," David spoke without looking at Marcus, "we're fully booked." Marcus frowned slightly. "I thought." Ashley glanced nervously between both men. "The system just showed." David cut her off. "It updated." Marcus looked calmly toward the monitor. "It updated in 3 seconds." David finally looked him in the eye. "I'm afraid that's how technology works sometimes." Marcus said nothing. He simply nodded once, then asked politely, "If another room becomes available tonight, I'll happily pay whatever your highest rate is." David folded his hands. "I'm not sure this property is the best fit for your situation." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry. There are several budget hotels about 5 miles east. They're usually more." He searched for the word. "Flexible." Silence. Marcus understood exactly what he meant. He also understood why David wouldn't say it directly. He wasn't judging Marcus by what he'd said. He was judging him by what he saw. Marcus looked down at Nora, sleeping peacefully. He He forced himself to smile. My daughter is exhausted. We've had a long day. I'd really appreciate it if you checked one more time. Ashley hesitated. I could. David looked at her. She stopped speaking. Marcus noticed. So did someone else. Near the entrance, a young valet watched quietly. Her name, tag read. Priya. She had been watching since Marcus walked in. Something about him seemed familiar. Not because of his clothes. Because of his face. She couldn't place it. Not yet. But she knew one thing. The little girl looked freezing. Without saying a word, Priya walked to a nearby hospitality station. She picked up a fresh white towel, then approached carefully. Excuse me, sir. Marcus turned. I thought your daughter might. Ahem. David. Priya stopped instantly. He didn't even look at her. Back to your station. Priya lowered the towel, slowly. I'm sorry. She whispered to Marcus. Nora opened her eyes, just enough to notice. The little girl gave Priya a tiny smile. Thank you. She murmured sleepily. Priya smiled back, then quietly returned to the entrance. Marcus never forgot that moment. Ashley looked uncomfortable now. She knew Priya had done nothing wrong, but nobody challenged David. Not openly. The atmosphere around the desk changed. Conversation in the lobby slowed. A businessman near the coffee lounge looked over the top of his laptop. An elderly couple paused beside the elevators. A mother waiting for her rideshare instinctively pulled her son a little closer, not because Marcus had done anything threatening, but because uncertainty spreads quickly in public places. One guest quietly lifted a phone. Not to intervene. To record. Marcus noticed. He wished they wouldn't. He didn't want Nora's worst memory becoming someone else's viral video. He took a slow breath. Not because he was angry, because he was trying very hard not to become angry. Then Nora tugged gently on his hoodie. Daddy? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Did I do something wrong? Everything inside Marcus stopped. He slowly knelt until he was eye level with her. Rainwater still dripped from his sleeves onto the marble floor. He brushed a strand of wet hair away from her face. No, sweetheart. His voice was soft. You didn't do anything wrong. She searched his face. Then, why doesn't she want us here? Marcus swallowed. For one dangerous second, he wanted to end all of this. One sentence. I own this hotel. That was all it would take. The room would appear. The smiles would return. The apologies would begin. But then he looked into Nora's eyes. She wasn't watching to see whether her father could win an argument. She was watching to learn how a good man responds when the world isn't fair. Marcus gently kissed her forehead. It's going to be okay. He stood, turned back toward David, and before he could speak again, David reached for the phone behind the desk. Security, please report to the lobby. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second, not in defeat, in disappointment, because he already knew the night was about to get much worse. The call had barely ended before two security officers appeared from the hallway beside the concierge desk. Neither one looked angry. That somehow made it worse. They walked with the quiet confidence of men who believed they were simply doing their jobs. The older guard's name tag read. Reggie. Beside him walked a younger officer. Tyler. Reggie stopped a respectful distance from Marcus. Good evening, sir. Marcus nodded politely. Evening. We've been asked to escort you off the property. Nora looked from the guards to her father, then back again. She tightened her grip around his hand. Marcus kept his voice calm. May I ask why? Reggie glanced toward David before answering. The front desk has reported that you're refusing to leave. Marcus looked genuinely confused. I haven't refused anything. I asked for a room. I was told none were available. I asked him to check again. That's all. For the first time, Reggie hesitated. His eyes drifted toward Nora, still wearing her medal, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. This didn't look like the disturbance he'd expected. Behind the desk, David spoke before Reggie could. This guest has become confrontational. Marcus slowly turned toward him. Confrontational? For one brief second, the word hurt more than being denied the room. He had spent 22 years building a company around respect. Now he was being described as a threat, simply because he refused to disappear quietly. Reggie cleared his throat. Sir, if you would just come with us. Marcus looked around the lobby. Nobody had gone back to what they were doing. The businessman had closed his laptop. The elderly couple stood frozen near the elevators. A concierge stared from across the room. The woman recording still hadn't lowered her phone. Marcus hated that most of all, not because he feared embarrassment, because children remember moments like this forever. He knelt beside Nora. She looked frightened now. "Daddy, are they taking us to jail?" The entire lobby went silent. Even the pianist stopped playing. Marcus felt something tighten inside his chest. He smiled anyway. "No, sweetheart. Nobody's taking us anywhere. We're just going outside." "But what?" Marcus looked toward the front desk, then back at his daughter. Sometimes people make decisions before they know someone's story. Nora frowned, but they didn't ask. Marcus couldn't answer, because she was right. Nobody had asked. Ashley looked down at the counter. For the first time that night, she couldn't bring herself to look at Marcus. Priya stood near the entrance, gripping the towel she'd never been allowed to hand over. She wanted to say something, anything, but she was new, still on probation. One wrong move could cost her job. She looked toward David, then toward Marcus. Finally, she took a small step forward. "Sir." Everyone turned, including David. Priya swallowed. There really was a room available. The lobby froze. Ashley's head snapped toward her. David's expression hardened instantly. "Priya, that's enough." She didn't move. "I saw it. There was one room left. It disappeared after you came over." Silence. David stepped toward her. "Return to your station." She stood her ground for just 1 second, then slowly stepped back. Marcus looked at her. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But their eyes met, and Priya understood. He had seen her courage, even if nobody else appreciated it. Reggie turned back toward Marcus. His voice had changed. It wasn't as certain anymore. "Sir, I really don't want this to become something bigger." Marcus looked at him carefully, then asked one quiet question. "If your daughter was standing where mine is, would you still ask her to walk back out into that storm?" Reggie opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He glanced through the glass entrance. Sheets of rain still pounded the sidewalk. Thunder rolled overhead. Tyler shifted uneasily. Neither guard looked comfortable anymore. David noticed. He stepped forward again. "If he refuses to leave, remove him." Marcus closed his eyes. Not because he was afraid, because he realized something heartbreaking. This wasn't about policy anymore. It wasn't even about prejudice. It was about pride. David couldn't back down now. Not in front of the guests. Not after making assumptions so confidently. Marcus slowly reached for Nora's hand. "Come here, baby." She wrapped both arms around him. He held her tightly. He could feel her heart racing. So he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "Remember something for me." She nodded. "People can't decide your worth. They can only reveal their own." She looked up at him, trying to understand. Maybe she was too young. Maybe she wasn't. Reggie took one slow step closer. "I'm sorry, sir. We have to escort you outside." Marcus looked at him, then at Ashley, then David, then Tyler. He realized something. If he revealed who he was now, the lesson would end. If he walked away, the truth would reveal itself. He made his choice. Without another word, Marcus bent down, lifted Nora into his arms, and quietly walked toward the front doors. No shouting, no threats, no arguments, just dignity. As the automatic doors slid open, freezing rain swept into the lobby. Marcus stopped just outside beneath the entrance canopy. Nora rested her head against his shoulder. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. I still think this is a beautiful hotel." Marcus smiled sadly. "It is." She looked back through the glass at the people inside. "I just wish it had kinder people." Marcus felt those words hit harder than anything David had said all night. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number he almost never used after business hours. The phone rang once, twice. A familiar voice answered. "Marcus." The calm in Marcus's voice was almost unsettling. "Carol, I need you at the downtown flagship. Right now." There was a pause. Then Carol heard something she had never heard before. Marcus's voice cracked, not with anger, with heartbreak. "My daughter just watched security remove us from my own hotel." Silence. Then one sentence. I'm leaving now. Marcus lowered the phone, looked through the glass one last time. Inside, nobody realized the storm had only just begun. Rain hammered against the glass doors. Marcus stood beneath the entrance canopy, shielding Nora from the wind with his own body. He slipped off his hoodie and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked up at him. "Weren't you cold?" He smiled. "I can always warm up." "You come first." Nora leaned against him, still clutching her trophy with one hand. Inside the lobby, life slowly began returning to normal. Or at least, everyone pretended it had. Ashley forced herself to greet another guest. "Welcome to Sterling and Rowe." Her smile looked different now, less confident. David adjusted his tie. He glanced toward the entrance. Marcus was still standing there, waiting. David shook his head. "He'll leave eventually." Ashley didn't answer. She couldn't stop thinking about the little girl's question. Did I do something wrong? The words echoed in her mind like an accusation she couldn't escape. Near the entrance, Priya remained at her station. But she wasn't watching Marcus anymore. She was watching David. She had worked there only 6 weeks. Long enough to learn one thing. Whenever David became too certain, someone else usually paid the price. 22 minutes later, headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV turned sharply into the circular driveway. It didn't stop in the guest parking lane. It drove directly to the front entrance. The driver barely had time to open the door. A woman stepped out before the vehicle came to a complete stop. Carol Whitfield, regional director. She ignored the umbrella someone rushed toward her with. She ignored the valet. She ignored the guests gathering beneath the awning. She ran straight through the rain. Ashley smiled with relief. "Oh, good. Carol's here." She looked toward David. "I guess someone complained." David nodded confidently. "I'll handle it." He straightened his jacket, practiced his professional smile, and walked toward the entrance. "Good evening, Ms. Whitfield." Carol didn't even slow down. She walked right past him. David blinked. "Carol." She kept walking. Past Ashley, past Reggie, past Tyler, straight through the doors, straight into the rain. Every employee watched, confused. Carol reached Marcus. Without hesitation, she stopped, took a slow breath, then lowered her head. "Mr. Carter." The words seemed to drain every sound from the lobby. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Ashley felt the blood leave her face. David's confident smile disappeared. Reggie looked from Marcus to Carol, then back again. Carol continued. "I am so incredibly sorry." Marcus looked at her quietly. "This isn't your fault." Carol's voice trembled. "No, but it is my responsibility." She looked down at Nora. The little girl's shoes were soaked. Rainwater still dripped from the ends of her hair. Carol knelt beside her. "I'm so sorry you had to experience this tonight." Nora looked at Marcus before answering. "It's okay." Marcus gently rested a hand on Nora's shoulder. "No, sweetheart. It isn't." Carol stood again. She turned toward the lobby. Her expression changed instantly. Professional, cold, controlled, the kind of look every employee feared. She walked back inside. Marcus followed, still carrying Nora. Nobody spoke as he entered. Not a single guest, not a single employee. The only sound came from rain tapping against the glass. Ashley instinctively stepped backward. David suddenly remembered the ID he'd barely glanced at. The out-of-state address. The hoodie. The tired father. Every assumption replayed itself inside his head. Carol stopped in the center of the lobby. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like steel. "Does anyone here understand who this man is?" Silence. David opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Ashley stared at the floor. Priya already knew, or at least, she suspected. Carol continued. "This," she gestured toward Marcus, "is Marcus Carter, the founder, the chairman, and the owner of Sterling and Rowe Hotels." Gasps spread across the lobby. The businessman near the lounge slowly stood. The elderly couple exchanged stunned looks. The woman who had been recording lowered her phone completely. Ashley whispered one word. "No." David's knees felt weak. His mind searched desperately for an explanation. There wasn't one. Marcus looked around the room, then quietly said something no one expected. They didn't know who I was. David nodded frantically. Exactly. Exactly, sir. If we'd known. Marcus raised one hand. David fell silent. They didn't know. Marcus repeated, and that's precisely why this matters. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. If kindness depends on recognizing someone's status, it isn't kindness. It's strategy. The lobby fell silent again. Marcus looked around at every employee, every guest, every face fixed on him. I didn't come here hoping to be treated like the owner. I came here hoping to be treated like a father. No one could meet his eyes. Marcus slowly looked down at Nora. She tugged lightly on his sleeve. Daddy, are they scared now? Marcus knelt beside her. They're not scared because I'm the owner. He looked back toward Ashley. They're scared because the truth finally caught up with them. No anger, no shouting, just honesty. And somehow, that was far more devastating. Carol stepped forward. Mr. Carter, I've already contacted Human Resources. Marcus gently shook his head. Not yet. Carol looked surprised. Marcus turned toward Ashley. Then David. Then Reggie. I want to hear them. No one moved. You all made decisions tonight. I think you deserve the opportunity to explain them. Ashley closed her eyes. She had wanted the ground to swallow her moments ago. Now, she wished it would. The silence stretched across the lobby. No one wanted to speak first. Marcus waited, patiently, not because he enjoyed watching them struggle, but because excuses spoken out loud often reveal more than silence ever could. Ashley finally looked up. Tears had already begun to fill her eyes. I'm so sorry. Marcus nodded once. I believe you are. She looked surprised. But I'm not interested in apologies yet. I'm interested in understanding. Ashley swallowed hard. When you walked in, I saw someone soaked from the rain. I saw an old hoodie. I saw muddy shoes. I thought. She couldn't finish. Marcus helped her. You thought I didn't belong here. Ashley slowly lowered her head. Yes, I did. The words landed heavily throughout the lobby. Marcus wasn't angry. He looked heartbroken. Thank you. Ashley blinked. You just told the truth. That's the first honest thing that's happened tonight. She began crying quietly. Marcus didn't interrupt. He let the weight of her own words settle. Then he turned toward David. David stood perfectly still, almost rigid. You told me this wasn't the right hotel for me. Marcus said calmly. What hotel did you think I belonged in? David stared at the marble floor. I don't know. Marcus waited. You do. Silence. You simply don't want to say it out loud. David closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped. I judged you. Marcus nodded. Yes. You judged me before you ever served me. David looked up. I thought I was protecting the hotel standards. Marcus took one slow step closer. Standards? David nodded weakly. Marcus gestured around the lobby. What standard exactly? The marble? The chandeliers? The room rates? He paused. My standard has always been much simpler. He looked directly into David's eyes. Treat people with dignity. If someone wearing a tuxedo walked through those doors tonight, would you have told him to try another hotel? David's silence answered the question. Marcus continued. You weren't protecting this hotel. You were protecting your assumptions. The word struck harder than any raised voice ever could. David's composure finally cracked. I've worked here 12 years. I've never. Marcus interrupted gently. I know. And in one night, you forgot everything hospitality is supposed to mean. David lowered his head. For the first time, he had no defense left. Marcus slowly turned toward Reggie. The security officer stood with his hands folded behind his back. Unlike the others, he met Marcus's eyes. I owe you an apology. Marcus nodded. You do. Reggie took a slow breath. When dispatch called, I assumed you were aggressive. I arrived expecting trouble. Marcus asked quietly, when did you realize you were wrong? Reggie looked toward Nora. The moment she asked if we were taking her father to jail. His voice almost broke. I've got a granddaughter. About her age. I haven't stopped thinking about that question. Marcus remained silent. Reggie continued. I should have asked more questions. I should have slowed things down. I chose the fastest solution. instead of the right one. Marcus stepped closer. You know why that matters? Reggie nodded. Because people trust uniforms. Marcus shook his head gently. No, because little girls trust adults. The entire lobby became still again. Marcus looked down at Nora. She quietly reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently, then turned toward everyone gathered. Guests, managers, housekeeping, valets, security, concierge staff. This company wasn't built because our hotels are beautiful. It was built because people believed they would be welcomed. He slowly looked around the room. Tonight, a father carrying his exhausted daughter through a storm walked into a hotel asking for help. He paused, and instead of seeing a father, you saw a stereotype. No one moved. No one dared. Marcus continued. If I had walked in wearing a tailored suit, with a luxury watch, and a leather briefcase, this conversation never would have happened. Ashley quietly whispered, You're right. Marcus looked at her. I know. And that's exactly what has to change. Carol stepped forward, waiting. Marcus nodded once. Carol. She straightened. Effective immediately. Ashley Myers. Ashley's employment with Sterling and Rowe is terminated. Ashley quietly covered her mouth. Marcus continued. David Cole. Your employment is terminated. David slowly closed his eyes. Not arguing. Not pleading. Simply accepting. Marcus turned toward Reggie. Reggie Simmons. There was another long pause. Everyone expected the same outcome. Marcus looked carefully at him. You failed tonight. Reggie nodded. I did. But you also admitted your failure. Without hiding behind policy. He looked toward Carol. Reggie is suspended pending a full review. Carol looked surprised. So, is every security supervisor who signed off on procedures that encourage removal before understanding? Reggie looked stunned. Marcus continued. If the investigation shows you learned from this, you'll return. If it shows you didn't, you won't. Reggie's eyes filled. Thank you. Marcus shook his head. Don't thank me. Earn it. He turned toward Tyler. You followed instructions. But next time, if something doesn't feel right, speak. Tyler nodded immediately. I will, sir. Marcus turned back toward Carol. There will also be another promotion tonight. Everyone looked confused. Marcus smiled gently toward the entrance. Priya. The young valet froze. Sir, you saw a child who was cold. You didn't see status. You saw a little girl. Priya nodded nervously. I only wanted to help. Marcus smiled. And that's exactly why you belong in hospitality. He turned to Carol. I want Priya enrolled in our guest relations leadership program this week. Carol smiled for the first time that night. Done. Priya covered her face as tears rolled down her cheeks. I won't let you down. Marcus smiled warmly. I know. Because unlike everyone else tonight, she had already shown him who she was. By sunrise, the story had already begun to spread. Not because Marcus wanted publicity. He had specifically instructed Carol not to issue a press release. This isn't a marketing opportunity. He told her. It's a leadership responsibility. But some stories don't stay inside walls, especially when dozens of people witness them. The woman who had quietly recorded part of the confrontation never posted the video. Instead, she deleted it. Later, she would tell a friend, it didn't feel right turning someone's worst night into entertainment. Marcus never knew. He probably never would. But somewhere, one stranger chose compassion over attention. That mattered too. At 8 o'clock that morning, every executive inside Sterling and Rowe gathered around the conference table. No one spoke. Marcus entered carrying two things, a folder and Nora's gold medal. He placed the medal carefully on the table. Several executives looked confused. Marcus began quietly. Last night, my daughter won the biggest competition of her young life. He gently touched the medal. She should have gone to bed, believing the world celebrates kindness. He looked around the room. Instead, she went to bed asking me why grown adults could be so mean. No one interrupted. Marcus continued. This meeting isn't about 3 employees. It's about us. If one hotel forgot who we are, that's not their failure. It's mine. Silence settled across the room. Then Marcus opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. He slid copies across the table. Every guest is someone's whole world. Treat them that way. Marcus looked around the room. That sentence becomes our new standard. Every front desk, every training program, every interview, every performance review. If someone cannot live by those words, they cannot work here. No one argued. No one wanted to, because every executive understood. This company had just changed forever. The weeks that followed transformed Sterling and Rowe. Not because of fear, because of purpose. Hospitality training was completely redesigned. Employees no longer practiced luxury service first. They practiced empathy first. Receptionists learned to greet every guest before noticing what they wore. Security teams received new de-escalation training focused on understanding before intervention. Managers were taught one simple principle: questions before conclusions. Employees who showed extraordinary compassion were recognized publicly, not with certificates, with promotions, scholarships, leadership opportunities. Priya became the first graduate of the new Guest Relations Leadership Program. 6 months later, she was managing guest experience at one of Sterling and Rowe's busiest locations. She kept one folded towel behind the front desk every day, just in case another tired child walked through the doors. 6 months later, Sterling and Rowe opened its newest flagship hotel. Reporters expected Marcus to discuss expansion, profit, growth. Instead, he invited someone else to speak first. Nora, now 9 years old. She walked confidently to the podium. Her gold medal rested inside a small shadow box beside the microphone. She smiled at the audience. My dad says hotels aren't beautiful because of chandeliers. A few people laughed softly. They're beautiful because of the people inside them. She paused. When I was 8, I thought beautiful buildings always had kind people. Her voice grew quieter. Then one rainy night, I learned they don't. The room became completely silent. But I also learned something better. She smiled toward her father. Kind people can change buildings. They can even change companies. The audience erupted into applause. Marcus stood quietly beside the stage. Not because he was proud of himself, because he was proud of the little girl who had turned one painful memory into wisdom. He walked to the podium. The applause slowly faded. Marcus looked across the crowd. 6 months earlier, standing in another lobby, he had watched strangers decide who he was before he spoke. Today, he wanted every employee listening to remember one thing. I never wanted people to recognize me. I wanted people to recognize themselves. He paused. If kindness only appears after someone becomes important, it isn't kindness. It's convenience. Several employees quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Marcus looked toward Nora. My daughter asked me a question that night. He smiled. Why were they so mean? I've spent 6 months thinking about that question. I still don't have a perfect answer. But I do know this. The answer isn't anger. The answer isn't humiliation. The answer is choosing to become the person you wish had been standing behind that front desk. The audience rose together, not because they had been told to, because something inside them compelled them to. It wasn't applause for a successful businessman. It was respect for a father who refused to let his daughter's first lesson about prejudice become her last lesson about people. That evening, Marcus and Nora checked into the new hotel. As ordinary guests, no announcements, no reserved suite, no executive escort, just another father and his daughter. A young receptionist smiled warmly. Welcome to Sterling and Rowe. We're so glad you're here. She never looked at Marcus's clothes. She never looked at his watch. She never wondered who he was. She simply smiled at Nora. You must have had a long trip. Can I get you some hot chocolate while your dad checks in? Nora looked up at Marcus, then smiled. I think your hotel finally learned. Marcus smiled back. I think. So did we. As they walked toward the elevators, the camera lingers on a small framed sign behind a reception desk. Every guest is someone's whole world. Treat them that way. Somewhere, a tired father would walk through those doors tomorrow. Somewhere, A frightened little girl would find warmth instead of judgment. They would never know the names Marcus Carter or Nora Carter. They would never hear about the rainy night that changed everything. But they would feel its impact, because one father chose dignity over revenge. One little girl asked the question no adult in that lobby was brave enough to ask. And one painful night became the reason thousands of strangers would be treated with kindness for years to come. Because true character has never been revealed by how we treat people who can reward us. It has always been revealed by how we treat the people we believe have nothing to give us at all.